Hello and welcome. Thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to do a presentation on the Gemini Lunar Eclipse, which occurs at 9:30 a.m. Universal Central Time on the 30th of November. Now, before I go any further, I'd be very grateful if you've yet to subscribe to my channel. To do so now, please click or tap on the bell notification symbol, because every time I launch a video, this will give you an alert. Also, please take advantage of my year 2021 personal horoscope special offer. You can order now and get the rest of 2020 for free, plus the whole of 21, your character analysis, 30% off. It's all based on your unique birth data, so this takes you way above your zodiac sign and gives you some very important information that can help guide your decision making in what's going to be a pivotal year for so many of us. But you know, what I'm going to do today is tell you about this eclipse, but also tell you how it is going to impact on your zodiac sign. So please stay with me for that, which comes a little later. But the important thing about this eclipse is it's going to be reactivating a Saros eclipse series, which first began in 1984, a very long time ago. And it was actually on the 30th of May, there was a Gemini solar eclipse. Now this one obviously is a lunar eclipse, so we're talking very much about communication. But the sign of Gemini is about quick wits. It's about flexibility because it's a mutable sign. It's the third zodiac sign of the entire zodiac. So house 3, or Gemini energy, is very much to do with the ruler of this sign, which is Mercury, communication. And you can see from the wheel on the screen that yes, we do have a pivot between the sun in Sagittarius and the moon on the other side of the heavens in Gemini, but also Mercury, the planet which governs Gemini, is in a very influential location in Scorpio. And Mercury in Scorpio is very much about diving deep. It's about understanding not necessarily just the information we have, so we can actually have information in our grasp, but it's how we correlate it. It's how we comprehend information. So it's not just about conversation, it's about the depth of conversation. Or if we're talking about, say, track and trace for the fight back against COVID, we can have a welter of data washing around, but it's how we make it work for us that's going to be so important. So you can see in this chart, the ascendant is actually 25 degrees Sagittarius. So interesting that it's in the same location as the sun, but the position of Mercury in Scorpio is in the 11th house, which is very much to do with person kind, so community as a whole. So the conversation we're all going to be having, you can see that Mercury at 27 degrees actually forges a very exact angle with Pallas, which is an asteroid, and that's very much about getting busy, being very active, taking the initiative, because all those Capricornian planets which have been so dominant this year are all in the first house of this chart. The first house is our body, it's our enthusiasm, it's how we regenerate new beginnings. So I think, although this is a lunar eclipse which does challenge us to get beyond just our initial thought and connect the thinking process with our emotions, because Mercury is in the deep sign of Scorpio, forging a very constructive link to that stellium of planets in the sign of Capricorn, this can be a time, I feel, over the next 6 months when we really start to see an improvement of the response to COVID, because we get to grips with that information, because we understand much more the need to interact with each other in a much more practical and efficient way. Now, it is true to say that Venus is in opposition in this chart with Uranus, so that points towards surprises, particularly around relationships. And obviously, the moon in Gemini is quite flighty. It's very charismatic, but I think it's kind of saying to us that we can have lots of conversation, but it's what's the meaning behind that conversation. But because we've gone through an eclipse series over the last 2.5 years, which has been centered on the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, this is a new dawn. We're moving into this Aries eclipse, this air sign eclipse, which is asking us to communicate, but not just through text messages, social media. It has to be meaningful. Now, I think whether your politics is, if you're in America, Democratic or Republican, one of the things that Barack Obama has said recently is that we have a problem with truth decay. And do you know, it's such a clever concept, because whatever politics we all have, there's a lot of partisan and rather polarized opinions that have really developed over the last few years, which has been, I think, very destructive for democracy in lots of ways. Because if we have truth, we have decency. And, it's naive to think that states will always be totally open, or politicians totally open. And obviously some sections of the media, including social media, it's not always about truth and sharing information which is correct. It's about monetizing. But I think what we're going to get with this eclipse is a push, and this is going to be enhanced even more by the solar eclipse, which occurs on the 14th of December, which is absolutely sensational because it forges such an amazing link with Mars, and that solar eclipse is in Sagittarius. This is a new beginning for us all. And obviously we're all absolutely weary with the impact of COVID, affected by it in terms of people we've lost, or the isolation it's created, the lack of touch, contact, hugging, handshakes, the lack of freedom of movement, the fear that it's created. It really has been a nasty old year. So I think that this is going to be a real pushback moment. So though eclipses can bring to the surface problems, and I think this one is really saying about the problem with the lack of truth around communication. So that's really the principle of Sagittarius, is very much about the higher principle, the higher philosophy, the higher truth. Whereas Gemini energy is everyday chatting. So if someone asks us, how are you? And I'll say, oh, I'm absolutely fine, thanks. But actually I've got a blinding migraine, because we don't want to bore them with our issues. But maybe society has become so superficial, we've lost sight of the need for truth. So what's going to come through with these two eclipses, reactivating the Saros series that began on the 30th of May 1984, is a breakaway from that bruising opposition that's gone on across the polarities of Cancer and Capricorn over the last 2.5 years. This is a new dawn, but it's up to all of us to try to communicate in as decent and honest way as possible, or say nothing. So if we have theories and we go onto Facebook and share our theories, but they're not based in fact, we're just adding to the problem. That's my humble opinion. You may disagree with me and want to share that under this video. Now, how is this going to impact on you from your individual zodiac sign? Well, please stay with me for the next portion. I will put some timestamps underneath too, but Aries through to Pisces, that comes for you next. So Aries, it's all about everyday communication for you, but it can also be about your technology. It can be about your mode of transport. It could be about higher education, but all these areas are going to be ones that you're grappling with over the next month, particularly. Obviously, this solar eclipse does have an overlap that goes on longer than that, but you can see there is a huge cluster of energy still in the sign of Capricorn. So your role in life is still very important to you. So how you are interacting with others, expressing your ideas, your belief system, your values, is going to be very important to how you improve and enhance your role, particularly professionally, or you have difficulties in that area. So if you've lost your job because of COVID, I think there could be an opportunity to go on a course, learn new skills. Even if you do it informally by watching YouTube videos, you're going to be really informing yourself so much better over the next 6 months. You're going to be quite amazed by how much knowledge that you amass. but it could also mean that your major philosophies can go through a shift over this next 6-month period, but it can be exciting for you. But you need to balance those philosophies with making it work for you in a real way in terms of your role in life, in terms of employment, responsibility, obligations, goals and ambitions. Now, Taurus, for you, the axis that's emphasized here is the 2nd and 8th houses. Now, because your sign is very much about the 2nd house anyway, your ruler Venus is very much about making sure that you're well provided for in terms of security, financial security. So that could be something that you do need to think about. And because there is that cluster of Capricornian energy, which for you is in your 9th house, in terms of equal house for 0 degrees of Taurus, well, those Capricornian energies suggest that finding new sources of information, and ironically, even if it's not easy to do at the moment, and not necessarily specifically in the next month, but over the next 6 months, I think you may be thinking about change of location or going on some kind of course of higher education. But if you move or you travel, it's not going to be a surprise, but it has to work for you financially as well for you to feel really comfortable with it. But because your ruler Venus is deep diving itself along with Mercury in the sign of Scorpio, but is in an opposition with Uranus, if there's something you're not happy about in a relationship, especially if there's a lack of agreements over core values and money, then you could decide to bail out, because what's really going to qualify this lunar eclipse for you is your essential truth, because all those planets in your 9th house are asking you to re-clarify what really gives you your motivation, your higher purpose. But when it all boils down to it, the brass tacks of money could be part of the equation you're grappling with over the coming weeks. Now, Gemini, for you, of course, this lunar eclipse occurs in your own sign. But it could be because the sun is in your 7th solar house that it is relationships that you're thinking carefully about over the next 6 months. And that would be understandable, especially with the solar eclipse in Sagittarius that occurs on the 14th of December. But perhaps someone's going to challenge you about your attitude to relationships, or perhaps someone's going to sweep in and make your heart race that much quicker, because Venus is in a very strident opposition with Uranus. But they're moving across your 12th and 6th houses, so it could be through work that suddenly you have a connection with someone that you're not expecting. So a surprise connection in a relationship environment, or in a current relationship, it needs to be working for you in terms of a sense of excitement and engagement. If you're not getting that, I feel that there's a part of you that could yearn for something deeper, perhaps even more intimate, if the sexual side of an existing relationship isn't very good. And the cluster of energy in Capricorn, for all Capricorns, continues to be very much about business and longer term income. So you're wanting to make that work well for you. Now, Cancer, this new moon occurs in your 12th house, which is about secrets. It's about our enemies that we're unaware of. It can be about the shadow side of our nature, the part of ourselves we don't quite want to look at. Is there part of your situation that you're in a little bit of denial about? Are you just focusing on practical things but ignoring your more emotional needs? You might think, well, I wouldn't do that, Patrick, because I'm a Cancer and I'm ruled by the moon. So you're a sign very much imbued in the need for emotional interaction. But are you sometimes so well defended with all those planets in Capricorn? Your defenses are probably very much up at the moment. But if you're so defended that you're not receiving anything, you may not be giving yourself the permission to actually be a bit more vulnerable, quite frankly, with this lunar eclipse. So ask yourself if you are being a bit too defensive around relationships, but also about your relationship with yourself. And that may mean acknowledging that perhaps you are more vulnerable than you would like to admit at times. But I think that truth, which can come from the 12th house in terms of self-knowledge, can help you, therefore, to evolve and move into a stronger version of yourself. Because it's not what I think that counts, it's what you think in terms of your relationship with yourself and also your closest relationships with family members, a partner, or your friends. That's the key relationship, not what I think. But you have an opportunity to come to terms with some tender strands that perhaps have been pushed to one side. Now, Leo, this is a very charismatic lunar eclipse for you. You could be spoilt for choice over the next few weeks, perhaps for the next 6 months or so, to be honest. The first 6 months of 2021 are going to be very dynamic around relationships because of Saturn and initially Jupiter's journey through Aquarius before it moves into Pisces in mid-May. So I think relationships are going to be under the microscope for you. And this particular lunar eclipse is saying, you know, are you given enough time to your friendships? Or are you given enough time to your romantic needs? Or are your children getting enough of your free time, not just at a practical level, so you can engage with them and play if they're younger, or just listen to where they're up to in terms of their interests if they're older, if they let you. Of course, it's not always easy, I know that. But what I would say to you is you do have an opportunity to pivot in terms of your longer term future, which is where the moon is. So if you're doing something that isn't giving you fulfillment around your long term future, and it's not enabling you to be creative and self-expressive in the way you would like, then think again over these coming weeks. Now, Virgo, because Gemini, like you, is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is so prominent in this particular horoscope, the moon is high in the sky. If there's a part of you that's quite private and you're not someone who easily shares how you feel, you could be quite surprised over the next 6 months that you do ventilate deeper emotions in a more direct way. But I think if you do that, that's really healthy. Also, Mercury is in your 3rd house, forging a great link with the posse in Capricorn in the 5th. So don't underestimate the ideas that you have, particularly in the professional situation. You need to feel fulfilled. If you're just going through a role which means that you provide processes, I don't think necessarily it's going to be enough engagement for you. You need more stimulation over the next 6 months. But you need to do it in a way that retains your sense of security, which is entirely understandable. So none of us follows our heart's desires totally. Well, perhaps some people do, if really confident and head off out backpacking around the world with very little money. And I personally have huge respect for people like that who just follow their passions like that. But for a lot of us, we want to keep a semblance of security in the picture, even if we're wanting to change things to make it more varied, more interesting, more stimulating. But I think if you've got a professional or life role at the moment which is boring, even if it does give you that security, that's going to be what this lunar eclipse asks you to grapple with. Now, Libra, your sign, of course, is very much about balance, and this lunar eclipse is in your sister air sign of Gemini, which for you is about expansion, discovery, the 9th house. It can be about travel as well. But because you have the sun in the 3rd house, and also you can see from the wheel on the screen earlier, the ascendant was also in Sagittarius, your situation, your mind is going to be picking up speed. But you know, all that you've gone through over the last few years has created a lot of challenges. A lot of Libra people write to me on YouTube particularly, expressing how bruising it's been in terms of how you feel about yourself, how your emotional interactions have gone, your sense of security has been challenged hugely at times. Maybe people have been very demanding, or there's been power games going on around the emotional players in your life, particularly family members. And I think that you're going to start to see your way through this now. You've learned so much, and what you can retain that's really worthwhile and solid is going to become much more obvious as these new eclipses come in. But essentially, stay open-minded. So even if you've learnt new stuff, still stay as flexible as you can going forwards. Now, Scorpio, of course, for you, this eclipse occurs in your second solar house. In your eighth solar house, which is very Scorpionic. The sun is in your second solar house. So the eighth second house is about, there could be a demand for money, or you may have an unexpected cost over the next few weeks. But I think because Mercury is in such a brilliant location, along with Juno, which is the asteroid of relating, and also Venus, the potential to steer your way through this lunar eclipse is actually very good. And I think your opportunity comes from recognizing where you should take a bit more of a firmer grip on the tiller of your life direction. So it's saying to you, don't be passive, but there may be some points where you're sharing things with others, whether it's a romantic intimacy, whether it's money, whether it's a relationship with a financial provider. It's all very Scorpionic. If there are things you want to change there, I actually thought that you can change them in a very progressive, well thought through and well researched way. This eclipse generally can be very helpful to you indeed. Now, Sagittarius, of course, this eclipse occurs in your opposite sign. If there is a relationship in your life that's not working very well, it could be flagged. I've got to be honest, because you've got Mercury, Juno and Venus all in your 12th house, and of course Venus is opposite Uranus in your 6th house. So little niggles and irritations in a romantic situation, or if you're not feeling that a partner is very supportive of you in terms of the more tender psychological sides of life, around stress, anxiety, stuff like this. If you're with someone who's quite dismissive, you could start really thinking about whether you're in the right relationship. Also, if you work for someone who doesn't pay you very well or doesn't really recognize your talent, you may need to do some research and think about that relationship as well. But for you, generally, it's all about relationships over the next 6 months. But for you to really prosper in any relationship, you need to feel that you're really alive in that relationship. So if you're in a relationship where you don't feel very stimulated and you're just sort of rubbing along, coexisting, and there's not much spark or excitement, I think you could be thinking about changing that over the next 6 months. But equally, if you're in a relationship where you're not attuned enough to your partner's needs, this is a great opportunity to awaken yourself, to be more of an emotional relator, which can be challenging for Sagittarius people because you like excitement, you like the big plan, you like to go for things that give you a sense of drama. But emotional communication is the area that can be so precious to you at this time. Now, Capricorn, this eclipse for you occurs in the 6th house, which is about details. It's about everyday organisation. It's about work. It's about where you're of support to others and providing services. But it's also about feeling that you're eating well and that you get good sleep and enough exercise. So all those things are very important. But the sun on the other side of the heavens is saying to you, don't forget about the psychological stuff. So if there is something out of kilter in the organisation of your world, or you're in a job which is very dull, don't just think about it practically, even though, of course, you are intensely practical, because your ruling planet is Saturn, which, of course, is the gatekeeper of order, and time. So it's very important that you don't let that pulverize your passion, but also your vulnerability. So being open to be vulnerable is very, very important. But you do have Mercury, Pallas and Venus in your 11th house of friendship, and Mercury in particular is forging an amazing link to that cluster of planets in your sign. So someone can be coming through in your world that you're beginning to build a greater appreciation and respect for, which is fabulous. But don't be fearful of embracing your more vulnerable side. It's going to attract much more goodness to you than resisting it and just trying to make everything work just in an automatic way. We're humans, we have fear. We may not want to, and may not be appropriate to share it with anyone, but with trusted confidence, you can grow and evolve. And I do feel that the next 6 months is going to surprise you by how you continue to awaken around what's really important to you. A much more psychological and spiritual and healing dimension to your nature is really going to come to the fore over this next half year. Now, Aquarius. Of course, the sign of Gemini is in the air triplicity, so that's lovely for you. And it's about play in the 5th house. It's about pleasure. And of course, this time of the year usually is about getting together with people that we're fond of, that we haven't had a chance to meet for some while, socialising, going for a meal, having a drink. It's a jolly old time for parties. The Sun, on the other hand, is asking you to stay very mindful of the big picture, your long-term plan. And with Mercury in a very responsible location, hard work that you've invested over many, many moons can really start to become much more tangible. You can start to see the physical rewards of them as Mercury forges that fine link with Saturn, your co-ruler, Pallas, the asteroid of kind of action and getting things done, and Jupiter, the planet of growth, and Pluto, the planet of change. But you do have Venus in an opposition with your modern ruler of Uranus, and Venus is at the top of your horoscope. Yeah, I think that could be sudden changes around where you live, or maybe thinking of working from home if COVID has denied you of the ability to go out, because maybe your employers have decided to move things to home working, or maybe you've decided to think more about self-employment and stuff like that. So the creativity that comes from this moon is awesome. Really and truly, the last few years have been, along with Libra and possibly Cancer, the most bruising time you can ever remember. It's just, there's been so many examples, I feel, for us Aquarius people, of opposition that we perhaps didn't see coming, not because we're dumb or anything like that, but actually because maybe we've been too trusting or believed too much in person kind. And it's been very hard to realise that there is a lot of shadow out there. It's not all light. And I can't say because Jupiter and Saturn moving into Aquarius will bring total light, because they won't. It's just not that simple. But I think the eclipses now in Gemini and Sagittarius, this one, 30th of November, and the solar eclipse on the 14th of December, are going to bring so much more positivity. And you're going to come out of yourself. And the great thing about getting Saturn out of the 12th solar house, it's really, really grim there. So it's mainly been there. Obviously, it had a quarter year in your sign from the 22nd of March earlier this year to the 2nd of August. But essentially, for the last 2.25 years, by the time it moves into Aquarius on the 17th of December, it has, well, it would have been in total for 2.5 years in Capricorn because of its first pass, which began on December the 17th, 2017. But I do feel Saturn moving into your sign might be better than you think. Saturn came onto my sun in between the 22nd of March to the 2nd of August, because I'm at 0 degrees Aquarius. And of course that can potentially lead to limitations, but what's less known is that Saturn does bring rewards, sometimes more than Jupiter. You might really be surprised by this, but having them both together for the first time since 1405 on the winter solstice on the 21st of December is bringing new energy, but mostly it's getting out of the 12th house energy, which is so grim. And even when this eclipse series started in 1984, Jupiter was in Capricorn, and guess what? The Dow Jones bombed that year. So Jupiter moving into Aquarius is even though it's coexistent with Saturn still, is a much more positive proposition, I think. But it's all about networking. It's all about communication. So there's an opportunity to communicate in a more outgoing way, but the lessons that you've learned about what makes you really tick, about what makes other people really tick, about who you can really trust and rely upon, they're going to stay with you for life. I think they've been that profound. Which brings us, as ever, as I'm always saying in these videos, to Pisces, and definitely not least if the 12th and last zodiac sign. So for you, the moon is in your 4th house, this lunar eclipse. Home, family, emotions. The sun's high in the sky in your sector of ambition. You do have Mercury and Juno and Venus in your 9th house of travel and looking at the world in a different way, perhaps learning a new reality. Are you thinking about changing where you live, or are you going to move for a job, if that's possible? Or are you wanting to find a new way of existing which really listens to your emotional needs? If that's the case, this chart's great for you, because what that construct of all those planets in Capricorn is saying is this can be a new future for you, but I think that somehow you have to pivot. You can't just float along with it, which can be something that you can have a tendency to do. It's time for you to take the lead. And it's not just going to be on the next month coming from this lunar eclipse. It's going to be over the next 6 months. You're going to need to take centre stage, take on more responsibilities, develop greater ambition and drive to go for what really gives you the emotional satisfaction, which is coming through this lunar eclipse. So that just about sums it up. Thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, the crucial thing for everyone at the moment is to stay safe. Whether you're someone who's very respectful about the need for social distancing, hand washing, wearing masks, or you're someone who doesn't believe in all of that, what I will tell you is the world is shifting in a better direction. And I think essentially this lunar eclipse is about us all trying to connect our thinking with our emotions. That's the bottom line. I wish you well. And remember, please check out beneath this video my link for your special offer personal horoscope for 21 character analysis, 30% off based on your birth data. No two charts the same, but for now, good luck and goodbye.